Ja, is goed. Ja, dit was alleen bij de eerste oefening was het een beetje de moedig gegaan.
Oké. Ja, kan je ze zo
Cheers. Thanks.
trekken? En qua water, ik heb er gewoon drie is dat genoeg? Nou, misschien als je nog een vierde hebt. Ja. Maar je hoeft niet meteen nu te doen hoor. Want ja, oké. Dat is goed. Thanks. Ja, misschien. Als we daar zitten. Ik in het midden.
Ik hier?
Ja.
Dat is pauze. Dat is pauze. Nou, dat had ik mezelf al geïnstalleerd. Super. I think you're supposed to be here in the middle.
Thank you.
Which is a good thing.
So, all right, welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The last people are coming in. We have a full house today, which I'm very happy to see. Welcome everyone. Please make yourselves comfortable because we're gonna talk about a very important topic, the scramble for minerals in Africa and at whose cost. Now, my name is Jacquini Bisselink. I'm a former United Nations Youth Representative on Human Rights and Security. I'm now an independent researcher and speaker on future human behavior and future generations. But most importantly, I'm very honored and happy to be your moderator for today. And we're gonna talk about something very important, a topic that actually affects each and every one of us. I already see some people on their phones. I saw some people working on their laptops. I have my iPad here, but have you ever considered where those minerals come from? So you can think about cobalt, you can think about copper, you can think about lithium, tantalum, all those resources, and they are essential in that energy transition that we are in right now. But the questions that we're going to answer today is, okay, at whose cost is this happening and who benefits from those mineral mining and that resourcing that we're seeing happening right now? And is this really a just and inclusive transition, or are we simply repeating old patterns under a green label? So lots of questions, and luckily we're not going to answer that by ourselves. We have a lovely panel here who I'm going to introduce in a minute, because before I do so, I want to turn to you. So I have a few questions and statements, and if you agree with this, you can stand up, or if this applies to you, you can stand up, and if not, you can sit down. Now, no worries, you don't need to be an expert on the mining in African countries. This is also just about your first association and your first ideas. So the first statement is, if this applies to you, you can stand up. Who here has decided not to buy a new phone, a refurbished phone, or a fair phone because of the exploitation of minerals in countries like Congo? If that applies to you, you can stand up. If you have, yeah.
It's good that the panel stands up.
Yeah, wow, the entire panel stands up. Okay, everyone can sit down again, but I'm gonna go to you here and ask you the question, which one of the three was it? Did you decide not to buy a new phone, a refurbished phone, a fair phone?
A refurbished one.
Yes. And what led you to that conclusion? What kind of information did you see? Something on Instagram or a video that made you think, okay, I'm not gonna do that because of that mineral sourcing?
Yeah, I saw that even though Congo is rich in natural resources, they're being exploited and the people are poor, whilst the corporations that mine the minerals, they keep all the money. So, yeah, in my opinion, it's not fair.
Yeah, thank you for that. Then the second question that I'm going to ask you, or the statement is, if you think local communities benefit enough from mining, you can stand up. No one. That is very uniform. All right. And then the last question is, if you think Europe is doing enough to make mining responsible, you can stand up. All right. Also very uniform. That's a lot to discuss. Now, we're gonna talk about this with our panel. So I'm gonna sit down and I want to introduce all of you, because next to me I have sitting the international chair of the Netherlands Commission for Environmental Assessment, the NCEA, and also someone who has decades of experience in international relations and diplomacy. So this is Simone Filippini. Can I please get a warm round of applause? And then next to Simone, we have Aquila. And Aquila is the project lead at ActionAid in Zambia. So you actually work with local communities. You work with small-scale miners on responsible mining. So a lot of experience on the ground. We're happy to have you here. Can I please get an applause for Aquila? And then finally, from the European Parliament, we have Marit Mai. I pronounced it correctly, right? Yeah, Marit Mai. And now this is not the most important part of your biography, but I think I want to mention this is one of the few members of European Parliament that is very successful in social media, Instagram, reaching people. If you don't follow her yet, check her out on Instagram. But more importantly, you're here because you also focus on women's rights, on workers' rights, and responsible and fair cooperation between Europe and Africa. So please, can I get one more applause for Marit? Yes. So we're going to discuss what a fair energy transition looks like, what also needs to change. And I would actually like to start with the people themselves. And the first statement that I want to discuss with you is local communities in Africa rarely benefit from the mining of critical minerals. I saw that all of you actually were also very skeptical about this, where those who reaps the benefits. But you actually work with those local communities, with the small-scale miners. So in your experience, what are the effects of those larger mining operations that are coming to countries like Zambia? Yes, that is your mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to get me at the back? Yeah. It's good? Okay. I think everybody really understands the situation on the ground. I saw that when you asked if Europe is doing enough to sort of curb some of the irresponsible mining activities, you all sat down, right? And also, you understand the situation that's sort of happening in the Congo, so you sort of have an idea of what's going on. Anyway, I'm going to share the situation in Zambia and some of the issues that sort of surround. I'll give you a context of the mining situation. So mining in Zambia is the backbone of our economy. I can tell you that it contributes about 70% of our foreign exchange. It also contributes to about 30% of government revenue. So you could see that we really thrive on this. It also contributes about 20% of our GDP. So it's pretty much a very strong economic driver, and we all rely on this sector. But the question that you raise is quite critical. What are some of the impacts? Despite this being a very strong economic driver, what are some of the? How does it impact, for example, the artisanal and small-scale miners, the local mining communities? How do they sort of interact with the mining sector? So I will begin to also speak to the issue around the artisanal and small-scale miners, because these are some of the most important employees or people that are part of the labor force. The major challenge that we see with artisanal and small-scale miners is the fact that they contribute a fair share to the mining production, but also they're not getting enough from that. Our cost of living presently is about it's about 11,000 kwacha. You could convert that, if you have a converter, to USD or to euro. But if you look at our average income that any sort of employee is supposed to get, it's somewhere around 5,000 kwacha. So mining itself, it's if you look at initially we spoke about how it's an economic driver and that sort of thing, but it's not really adding up to support or sustain the livelihoods of these ASMs. The ASMs are not making sufficient revenue to support or to sustain themselves. I give you that figure of 11,000 kwacha. So what are some of the issues that sort of exist? It's issues of limited market access, right? So you could be an ASME and you're doing quite a lot, but you don't have access to the market. So what do? You end up selling your product on what we call the black market. And at the black market has no regulation, right? So you could pretty much sell your product at as very lower than the market standard rate, maybe even 20% of that standard rate. So which means then that there's a real sense of exploitation that is going on, and the artisanal and small-scale miners can't earn enough income to support themselves. The other issue, of course, is that, the government is trying so hard right now to formalize artisanal and small-scale mining, but it's not sufficient enough, because you could get mining rights, but if you don't have the necessary capital, if you don't have the equipment, mining is quite capital intensive, and if you don't have the capital, how are you supposed to conduct that sort of mining? So what artisanal and small-scale miners do sometimes is that they partner with foreign entities, and they're made to be a front or beneficial owners in a sense. And while we have a lot of Chinese presence in our country, Lebanese presence as well. So sometimes they are able to ride on these licenses that are given to these artisanal small-scale miners, and then earn all that profit. So it's pretty much the issue of access to markets, low income from that can sort of sustain their livelihoods.
And because you already spoke about that exploitation, where are most of the profits actually going?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good question. I think if you look at Zambia, my country, and a couple of other countries in Africa, like the Congo itself, and if you've heard about what we call the resource curse, I'm pretty sure there's some scholars here who understand what the resource curse is. It's pretty much that countries that have got a lot of mineral wealth don't necessarily exhibit the obvious, and the obvious could be that you have improved public services, you have better schools, roads, and health access, but that isn't really the case in these countries. So where does the revenue go? So the revenue obviously has an outward flow. Most of the revenue is leaving the country and not benefiting the locals, and that is the major issue with Zambia. But there's so many other ways that this happens. There's also issues of illicit financial flows. If you look at the Zambia Financial Intelligence Center, they released a report that in 2023, Zambia lost about 3.5 billion to illicit financial flows, especially in the extractive sector. So if you compare that to, for example, we're now on an International Monetary Fund extended credit facility, which is about 1.7 billion. You compare it to that, and the amount that we're losing in illicit financial flows, if you do the math, you could see how the structural issues that we have in our countries. So there is a nature of an outward flow where local beneficiation is never seen, but we have the mineral wealth.
Yes, thank you so much. And I already saw you taking some notes, because I'm curious from an EU perspective, from a European perspective, what can we actually do? What can you do to make sure that those local communities actually reap the benefits of their resources and the labor?
Yeah, I think I was writing down because Akila made I think the key point, which is that most of the money is flowing out of the country, and most of the money also flows out of the country illegally with these illicit financial flows. So one of the things we think that from the side of the European Union we can or we should do is to make sure that when we have investments in mining, we also have investments in the production afterwards, in the value added, in the value addition of the mining. Because right now it's very exploitative and neo-colonial. We get out the stuff and then it's produced somewhere else. So the real value addition, let's say the value right now is already moving out, but the real value addition is never taking place in the countries where the mining is taking place. So this, I think, is really important if we support the investments from the European side. You must have learned from this program, which is called Global Gateway from the European Union, which is a program that wants to invest also in areas with critical raw materials, because we need them. Well, you showed us in the beginning for all our energy and digital lives here in Europe. But if we want to invest with that money, and that money is also ODA money, we must make sure that that money goes...
Wait, maybe ODA?
Sorry, is money which is official development assistance. So what we in the past would call development cooperation. If we use this money from development cooperation for these investments, it has to be done in a way that also benefits to local communities. It has to be done in a way that has the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals in mind, with goal number 1 being poverty alleviation in those countries where the investment takes place, but also to make sure that we talk to these local communities and we understand what local communities need, how they can improve their own situation. You didn't mention, but before I also worked with ActionAid, so I'm a proud colleague, former colleague of Aquila, and one of our partners also, I still remember very vividly, on mining in South Africa, always said, nothing about us without us. We are living here, we are working here. When you do these investments and when you do this work, you need to talk to us as well. So I think that's really important from the side of the European Union.
And that's a good bridge to the second topic that we'll talk about in a bit. But I'm also perhaps a bit of a critical note, but I'm also curious because, of course, from the European Union, they set a lot of guidelines for companies to do responsible sourcing.
Well, less guidelines since this week, unfortunately.
Yeah, we've seen that indeed. But we also know that there's a lot of companies that simply don't listen, right? They just do whatever they want. So what can you do from an EU perspective to also incentivize or perhaps also pressure companies to actually do responsible sourcing?
Well, maybe there's two things that we still have in hand. One is, of course, that we know companies that directly mine in, for example, Zambia, they need to comply with certain rules. But then there's the ones that use it in their value chain, and they have no idea where the gold came from. They have no idea where the lithium came from, and they don't care where. And here, of course, this is what the due diligence guidelines that we unfortunately voted against as a whole parliament, not me personally, just to make sure.
Yeah.
But as a European Parliament, was watered down very much. And this is really sad because it takes away this responsibility with these companies. But there's still another side, I think, that we can try and use also from the European side. And that is our negotiations on trade deals with these countries, but also with third countries. For example, the deal that the European Union has with Rwanda.
Yeah, I was one.
And we know that everything that Rwanda produces does not come from this country. Only a very small, limited proportion comes from Rwanda itself, and most of it comes from Eastern Congo. So
because maybe for the people who don't know it, the European Union has a deal with Rwanda to import minerals like lithium, for example. But cobalt, but Rwanda doesn't have those.
Yes, and right now, for example, we are negotiating a deal with the UAE, a deal on oil, which comes directly from the UAE, but also from gold. And gold comes from the Sudan. We know that the UAE has a relationship, a very toxic relationship that really fuels the war in the Sudan. So if we talk with these countries about these trade deals, I think we have to bring this part also into the equation and make sure we have to really walk the talk and put our money where our mouth is. If we talk about human rights, if we talk about environmental degradation, then we must make sure that also in our trade deals, this is an important element.
Also to ensure that people actually trust institutions like the European to uphold human rights, right? And Simona, I would also like to move to you because we heard from the local communities, from the European level, but you also did a lot of research and you have also a lot of expertise on what national governments can do. So I'm also curious from that perspective of national governments here, so like the Netherlands, Germany, whatever, that are doing these trade deals, what can they do to ensure that the people actually see those profits of the minerals in those local communities?
Well, maybe let's distinguish between different types of mining. You were talking about ASM, artisanal and small-scale mining. and maybe gold, which is, by the way, also very detrimental for health conditions, because they use a lot of mercury, which goes into groundwater, into rivers, poisons people and cattle and whatever, and the earth. And then you have large-scale mining of companies, right? So maybe just a little bit about the work I do, because this Commission of Environmental Impact Assessment, it exists in the Netherlands, and it reviews and advises government entities who are responsible for decision-making on policies and projects on the quality of impact assessment studies that companies or governments who take an initiative have to do. So in the Netherlands, each and any important policy or project has to undergo an impact assessment to see what the potential impact is on the environment. And some health issues are also taken into account. 35 years ago, the government of the Netherlands decided to also establish a group, which is within this commission now, and I'm the chair of it, that looks into those same issues abroad. So we support governments of low and middle income countries to assess, to review and then assess the quality of environmental and social impact studies made before they decide on projects. So on top of economic considerations, take into account in an appropriate manner environmental and social considerations. Super important, and it touches upon the issues you just, both of you, put on the table. And what we see, helping governments, so we are independent, neutral, I don't care whether it's about nuclear energy or anything else, or uranium mining, or it's about gold mining or whatever. We look just at the quality of the information that is needed to take an appropriate decision by a government entity, the competent authority. And part of that is, of course, public participation. Yeah. And meaningful public participation. And we see that it hardly ever takes place in a good manner. And many of those consultants who do those studies, they just start off with bad terms of reference, so you get bad studies. Yeah. And often the governments, because we talk about the European Union guidelines, OECD has guidelines, everybody has guidelines, lots of guidelines internationally, but they are kind of donor-driven. From our perspective, I stand with governments on the other side of the equation, Zambian government, or the Guinea government, or the Mauritanian government, and I see that this whole thing is basically in practice kind of fake, because they are just not able, with the little competencies and skills and people they have, to do the job. So there's huge pressure and increasing pressure from the mining industry, because the predictions are that we will have 40% more resource use in 2050, and the gap between available resources and mined resources is growing. So the pressures are on, especially also in the wake of the energy transition. I have lots of questions around energy transition, which can be also neo-colonial and exploitative.
Because I want to ask you something there. Yeah. How do you prevent those collaborations from getting those neo-colonial characteristics?
Well, that is by empowering governments. And you know, that is a huge gap, I feel, in the environmental, in the entire development cooperation industry, world, that there is a lack of real will and real integrity to have the strategic patience to really support governments to restructure their approaches, to improve their approaches, to enable them, which will enable them to make the right decisions at strategic level in the first place. Where do we want mining? What kind of mining do we want? Added value? How do we deal with these issues? So they can then say, okay, company X, no, sorry, you don't fit in our picture. Company Y, okay, yeah, but precondition X, Y, Z. You see countries doing that. Indonesia, but also Namibia now have said, nothing is going to be exported just like this. No raw materials out, only when added value is being there. And so companies who want to mine have to also come up with an industrialization plan to add value to that product. And it's really important. If I see, for example, Guinea, I've been in Zérékoré 2 times. It's 1,000 kilometers from Conakry, in the southeastern part of the country. And the largest deposit of iron ore is there. You know, they already do lots of bauxite mining, but this is iron ore. It's going to be exported, lock, stock and barrel, to China, a little bit to the European Union as well. That country, in 30, 40, 50 years, will have a huge environmental degradation and no added value realized from that incredible wealth that they have. It's not just iron ore mining what they have. They have much more as well. I see that all the time. I was in the northern part of Mauritania. It's 1.5 million square kilometers. If you look at the cadastre map, it's all divided.
Maybe can you explain a cadastre map?
Yeah, it shows, a cadastre shows how, say, the country is being divided. You know, you can see who owns houses, where are houses, but also industries, etc. And there are concessions already basically reserved. That whole part of that country is already divided in maps. It's uranium mining, a lot. There's also a lot of irregular, illegal gold mining, small and medium. So you see huge issues, and this government, and I see that with many of the governments, they just can't defend themselves against the forces that they encounter. I also see many great civil servants everywhere that want to do the right thing but are not able to. And the point is,
from these countries.
Yeah, from those countries. The international community doesn't have the integrity nor the will to really localize, to acknowledge and build that ownership, and have the strategic patience to do so.
Yeah.
Because you cannot do this from one moment to the other, and we all know how difficult it is in our own countries, right? So that is, I feel, an incredible gap, and I have seen a lot in...
I know you have decades of experience.
So I've become really fanatic about this point.
Yeah, we noticed, Simone. Thank you for that. Yeah. But I also want to give, because I saw a lot of people already taking notes and looking around, I'm sure that there are some questions in the audience as well. After the second topic, we'll also have some room for questions. So can I see some hands for someone who has a question? I already saw one going up really quickly there. Could you maybe stand up for me? And it would be perfect if you can address the question to one of our panelists or someone in specific. Yes. And what is your name also?
I'm Ibrahim Barry. It is more of an observation than a question.
Okay.
You said the governments are not able to defend themselves. I disagree.
Okay.
I'm an African. I'm from Sierra Leone, close to Guinea. The Zérékoré you are talking about extends to Guinea, to Sierra Leone and Liberia. I'm a geologist as well. The problem is the government connives with the mining companies and the other mining companies, and they exploit their people, take the money to Europe, to China. I give you 2 examples. You talked about Guinea, the bauxite. Also. Bauxite has been mined in Guinea since time immemorial. And all they do in Guinea is they connive with the companies in Canada and Australia, take the raw material to there. And those people go and process the bauxite, make it in tins and aluminum, bring it to Guinea, to Africa, 10 times more expensive. If Guinea could only work with Sierra Leone and Liberia within the MRU and establish a smelting company for bauxite to get aluminum. Another example, rutile and ilmenite in Sierra Leone. They mine rutile, they give rutile to the government. But the ilmenite, which is similar to rutile, the difference is magnetism, they take it for free. Another example, South Africa.
Last one.
Yeah, they mine PGEs in South Africa, platinum group elements. What they do, they take the iridium, which is so important for electronics. They don't pay any royalty. And the government in South Africa, in Sierra Leone and Guinea know that. The people in the ministry know that. So it is not because they're not able to defend it, it's because they are absolutely deadly corrupt.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, I'll go back to you, Simone.
Yeah,
Your comments.
I like challenges, and I don't mind you saying this because of course, I'm not naive. Huh? So I see there has been a lot of corruption in the past. There's still a lot of corruption, but I also see real change of people who really want to do things differently, and those are the people that we support. If we don't see any opportunity, so we see just a corrupt environment, we cannot work there because we work on the basis of equality. There's no money going over the table. We are neutral. We don't have to be there. And it's a fantastic position as a commission to be in. I must really applaud the Dutch government that they ever installed this kind of commission. It's fantastic. And we work with the people of goodwill and the people who want to help change, want to change that system. We can support them in building a more solid and effective system of decision-making based on both economic, environmental and social considerations, taking those all into consideration. Because if you don't do that, you have basically just like this. You make a decision based on nothing. And part of that whole approach is public participation. And I've seen also that if you don't do that, of course you risk security. Yeah. If you don't take people into account, you get security issues, especially around mining industry.
Yes, thank you, Simone. And I quickly also want to move to Marit. What are your reflections hearing this?
I think I really like the passion, and I would like to also ask you to have the same passion towards these international companies, because corruption comes from both sides. Mm-hmm. And you are right with the corruption in local governments, but the same corruption is taking place in Canadian companies, in European companies, in Chinese companies, in Turkish companies that do, or Lebanese, you mentioned Lebanese, companies that do these investments. So I think, you know, it's good that we are angry with corrupt governments, but I think we should be equally angry, or maybe even more angry, with all these corrupt companies that actually are the ones that are fueling this system.
A very concrete takeaway. Thank you. Yes, yeah, quickly, yeah.
Thank you. So I think I really sort of want to agree with the sentiments that he shares. The biggest challenge that we have in Africa is our political systems. So if you look at how we elect our officials, it's mostly, like everywhere else, of course, it's mostly corporation interest driven, right? So state capture actually happens even before the election. So during campaign times, these corporations are able to support that government, that incoming government, and sort of strike deals. And so when you see the government make its first tax policy reforms, it's that let's reduce this sort of import duty on this sort of product. But if you look at the entity that sort of controls that product, it's this and so foreign companies. So I think we need to sort of reform our political systems if we're ever going to reduce or limit state capture. Thanks.
Yeah. So also commenting on perhaps also late-stage capitalism and the impact of, you know, those big companies in democracy.
There's never one solution for a complex problem, and I think both of you have made
shown that
as well.
Thank you for sharing. Unfortunately, we have to go to the second topic, but after that, we'll also have some room for Q&A. Because the second topic is about the representation of young people and women in decision-making processes. Because we see that even when and if local communities benefit more, that not everyone within those communities have an equal voice in decision-making processes about mining. And I'd like to start with you, Simone, to also, because you have a lot of experience also with, for example, women's representation in international relations and decision-making processes. What is the risk of not having those groups in those spaces where decisions are being made about mining?
Risk are really bad decisions that will backfire on security, health, etc. If you look at mining, you often see that mining companies start and then you get foreign workers coming up. I hear a lot of cases there, for example, where there was no proper research done, and those communities are being, those foreign workers, they visit communities, they make girls pregnant. You get the social context that disrupts. Local people don't get the jobs. The women cannot go to their lands safely. You know, you get all kinds of social issues around that. But also it's about ownership of women. And for example, I was coming back to Guinea, one of those talks, because we always, when we go there as a commission, we have an expert group and we take also local people. We talk with local people, and I was talking to a women's group, and it's about Monimba, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site even. And, well, basically concessions all over the place and one in the middle of that mountain. And those women said, yeah, but we cannot eat from the mountain, which they always did. They always had those services from the mountains. But they thought that the mine would bring a lot of jobs, which is not true. And I asked them, have you ever seen a mine? They've never seen a mine. Have you ever seen a picture of a mine? They've never seen, they have no idea. So they're not being honestly informed. And so if you don't meaningfully and honestly with integrity involve people in the process before, you get issues, all kinds of issues. That the same goes for young people, you know, and it's about security, joblessness, it's about drug use. Often drugs come into the play when you get mining, you know, all weapons, conflicts, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it's a real interest, even if you don't believe in the issue, for proponents of projects or governments or who else to fully take into account the interests of all stakeholders involved. And of course, women and youth are an integral part of that.
Yeah, because Aquila, you work with the people. Who do you think the groups are that are not represented well enough in those decision-making processes? And I know that you are also, you have the co-mining initiative where you want to aim to give young people and women, I never like to say give them a voice because they already have a voice. You're amplifying the voices that are already there. Can you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Right. Yeah, so I think to begin to speak to your question, the main discriminated against groups really are, you know, the marginalized group. Okay, I should use this one. Okay, great.
It doesn't move.
You have to lean in a little bit.
Yeah, perhaps I'll just move it a little bit. Yeah, so the women and the youth, I think they're not highly represented in the mining sector. I will give you some of the barriers that they face. Some of the barriers they face are social norms, right? In Africa, we all have diverse cultures. You guys have your own culture. We also have our own culture. So sometimes some of the culture, some of the beliefs and norms are a little bit retrogressive. For example, you could find that in some of the remote places, they could say something like women should not be found at a mining site during that, you know, the time of the month, right? Because they believe that minerals are going to disappear. So there's things like that, there's certain beliefs like that that obviously limit participation of women. But also it's not only that, it's also the fact that women are not highly represented in decision-making processes. Presently, we don't really have a ministry of gender. We previously used to have that, so we don't have a strong gender machinery to sort of speak to the issues that women sort of encounter. So at present, we're pushing for, you know, the introduction of the Gender Equity and Equality Commission, so that, you know, women can have that sort of platform to express the voice that they actually have, right? So under the coal mining project, I think some of the strong initiatives that we've been undertaking are, you know, we've been doing a level of trainings, looking at issues of product development, professionalism, but also issues of occupational safety. I think these are some of the most important things. Women are very subject to very harsh conditions, harsh labor conditions. They have to sort of participate in the mining sector without perhaps sometimes personal protective gear or equipment, and that's pretty sort of dangerous for them. So one of the things also that we've done under the coal mining project has been that we have created what we call women watch groups. So they're mostly centered around gender-based violence awareness, and also act as a way to sort of provide a channel of redress. And
is this a campaign, or what should I imagine? margin for that project?
So we do a level of advocacy. There's so many things that are going on. We also do research as well, but it's more strong on building strong evidence, building, collecting policy recommendations from the local level up until the international level, for instance, to be able to influence systemic change. So the GBV Women's Watch committees that I've been also sharing with you have been very instrumental in driving gender-based violence awareness, but also you have to also notice that they're both women-led. So we have one in our two project settings of Kitwe and also Solwezi, and I think one of the most important things that one of the outcomes that I've really appreciated is the initiative that the people in the women in Kitwe have taken, and that is to sort of organize themselves into a cooperative. Our government has been encouraging individuals to sort of form cooperatives so that they can then be able to qualify for a mineral license. So that's what they've sort of done, and they're in the process of getting a mining license. Yeah. And I think that is going to be one of the best outcomes on this project, because then they will be able to participate in a more efficient manner. I've also been I'm aware that they're also in talks with a large-scale mining company to sort of see how they can collaborate. Because obviously, as I had mentioned before, a mining license is not enough. You need to have a level of capital, you need to have machinery, so they will collaborate with this large-scale mining corporation so that they can cover some of the deficiencies that they have, and then they could also get a level of royalties.
But at least there's a higher level of agency with those women, at least when they're doing the mining operations. Okay, and Marit, maybe also from your side, what is the role of the European Union in making sure there's more gender equality, perhaps also more agency in the mining sector?
Well, I think there's several elements that we have to do. Right now, the European Union is talking about its next multi-annual financial plan. That's the framework for the next budget. And I think it's super important that in that next budget, when we talk about our relationship to the global south, when we talk about international trade, when we talk about critical raw materials and mining, that we bear in mind that the SDGs, like we mentioned before, the Sustainable Development Goals, should be the driver. And number 5, which is the one on gender equality, should be really, really important. We know it's the one that it's most underfunded. We know that women's rights organizations, women's rights defenders have difficulties, not only here in Europe or in the Netherlands, but also in the global south, to fund their organizations and to be able to have that voice. It's super important that we do that. Together with a number of colleagues, we started a proposal to make sure that 25% of ODA money goes directly to women-led organizations and organizations for women human rights defenders, to make sure that you have those funds available to do that work. Because I think we often try to talk around it a little bit, but there's a lot of gender-based violence in mining. There's a lot of rape. There's a lot of, young girls, like you say, are raped and then they get pregnant. There is also, from what I remember, in countries where we visited, if women want to work in the mine, they need to sleep with the boss before they can get their contract. All of this is things that are happening, and they are really deteriorating the position of women in these communities also, and they break up these communities. So it's a double. It's two problems that are doubled up. So I think it's really important that we use this, that we make a new. In Europe, we have what is called a gender action plan for our international cooperation. I think we need a new gender action plan for the next one, also to have one that is really.
Yeah, what is missing? What would be added?
Well.
Don't get me started.
No, I think right now if we even have a gender action plan would already be, because I have many colleagues in the European Parliament who think that gender is an ideology, that gender equality is an ideology, that when we make proposals, they want to strike the words feminist, feminism, or gender equality out of those proposals. So I think if we get the same level that we have right now, it's already quite progressive, but of course there's more that we need. And there's also more that we need in youth action plan. There's a youth action plan also for this international cooperation framework. And this youth action plan needs to support young girls and boys in their communities. I think we see right now that in various African countries, Gen Z has had it. And they are raising their voices, and rightfully so. So I think it's important that we support them. We also make sure that we listen to those voices. We have these days or action weeks. We had an action week for girls, and in the European Parliament recently, where organizations from the Global South came and they told their stories, and some of them were really very brave. Also, young women talking about FGM, female genital mutilation, which is, I think, for 20 years old young women, really something to step up with. But it's important that we support these organizations and make sure that they can do what they want to do. So, like you say, they already have a voice. Make sure that we hear that voice. And I think they are already working on it. If you listen to what is happening in Nigeria or Kenya right now, the younger generation is saying, okay, this old corrupt way of working that you mentioned, sir, is something that we are really sick and tired of. We don't want to wait until we get our job because our uncle or our grandmother has had a relationship with I don't know whom, so that we really want to be able, because we studied, we are competent, we want to do that work as well.
Yeah, and thank you also for highlighting all the things that are already happening in those countries, in those local communities. I think that is very beneficial. But I like that you also pull the link a little bit more to closer to home, because what I'm quite curious about, to Simone, is that we see that national governments tend to include some typical stakeholders, right? So the national governments that they're working with, civil society, perhaps the companies. But I feel like there's a new kind of stakeholder that national governments also need to take into consideration, which is concerned citizens in, for example, the Netherlands or Germany, that are seeing a 24/7 stream of images coming out of Sudan and coming out of Congo, and they want to know, where is my government positioning itself? Where are the money flows going to and coming from? So I'm curious, in your research and in your expertise, do you feel like governments are doing enough to offer transparency and subsequently also create therefore some form of accountability between citizens and the governments?
In the end, the answer is no, because if you look at what the consequences are of non-action by our governments, they are very grave. Also for us, if you even look at just self-interest, you can see that if we don't achieve responsible mining practices, then you get more water scarcity, you get further environmental degradation, which you get more poverty, you get climate refugees. You already have those refugees. I was in northern Iraq recently, Kurdish region, but southern Iraq, there are already climate refugees coming from the southern part of Iraq to Kurdistan, where there's more water, because there's no water anymore. So if we don't get all those issues properly organized in a comprehensive way, this is not going to bode well, neither for the countries where we're talking about, nor for us. And our government is short-sighted, at least the former government. I hope that we get a better one now. Yes. I won't tell you on which side I stand, but I'm a progressive person. And that is highly necessary. We need comprehensive approaches for complex problems. You cannot come up with some unilateral kind of simpleton solution for something which is super complex. So we need integrated approach. We need both international cooperation. We need to fund it. We need humanitarian cooperation. We need trade agreements that are responsible, what you just talked about, that the European Union attaches criteria to proper trade relations, which is very important. UAE get all the illegal gold in the world, more or less. It's really incredible. Yeah. So, we need to have this comprehensive view on how to move forward, and our government has to really put political capital into it. and become a leader instead of some followers saying, bilaterally we can't do anything, it's the EU or it's someone else. No, we have to stand for our principles, and we have to really become a leader again in this field, which we've always been. And it's never simple, and we have to move from different sides, both EU, both NGO work is super important, but also the work that I do, which makes hope a difference at system level. In the end, the difference has to be also made at system level. If you only scramble at the bottom of the society, it's not enough. We want that everybody flourishes. So even where Action Aid is not present, we need citizens to have access to proper healthcare, proper education, proper service, proper infrastructure, proper rights, and not a government that doesn't really know what it's working on or is corrupt or whatever. And there are enough good people in the world who really want to work on this. Also within governments that are political level may be corrupt, but where civil servants see that very well, but they have difficulties making that difference themselves, and we can really support them there.
So make it comprehensible.
Comprehensive, put money behind your ideals and your words, whether you call it self-interest or you talk about solidarity or whatever, do it and reverse the entire setback in development cooperation. I can see already the dire consequences at country level. And that everything is connected in the end. You cannot say, okay, we do this and we don't do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yes, I see a few questions already, and we have time for a few. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions, and then we're going to answer them here. I'm going to go to you first. And who is your question for as well? And your name?
My name is Bastian. I have a question for all the panelists. My question is mostly, when we are talking about the extraction of resources, why do we never mention the excessive consumption in the West? The issue seems more like, it's not just for the energy transition, it seems more like we have a very spoiled and decadent Western society that thinks they have a right to all these resources. I think if we can temper the consumption, we can also temper the extraction and the exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastian. Let me see. Okay, wait, I'm going to go here first, yeah? Would you mind standing up for me? And your name and who the question is for as well.
Thank you. My name is Senele Lomo from Zimbabwe. My question is for all the panelists. And it's about reporting mechanisms and mutual accountability. For as long as policies continue to just focus on governments in our nations, then we lose out on the voice of civic society and trade unions where people actually sit and have honest conversations. And with the reduction of development aid, cooperation specific for NGOs, it makes it very hard for you to get the actual picture of what is happening on the ground. So I wanted to find out, is there intentionality behind creating reporting mechanisms that are going to help people to still share their story so that you continue to get the full picture of what is happening regarding the extractivism in Africa and what it is really doing in the picture? What is the quality evidence that you want and how do we give it to you?
Thank you. I think also perhaps for Marit it might be an interesting question. Okay, the last one. I hope this is not for all panelists. Can you please stand up for me and share your name and who the question is?
Sorry. Hi, I'm Naomi. My question is for Aquila. It's been touched on a little bit during both topics about the health impacts of exploitative mining. I was just wondering on the health impacts that you've seen on the ground and in your experience with your organization and how that can be helped by reducing exploitative mining. Thank you.
Thank you. What was your name again? Naomi. Okay, Naomi, I want to start with your question, if that is fine with you, Aquila, because this one is just for you. So about the health impact of the mining operations.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to touch on that, but I think you're so strict with time.
I'm so sorry.
So I think we've got some legacy health issues in Zambia, and one of the issues has been the one that we've had in a town called Kabwe of Central Province, where there was a level of lead pollution. It's been over 30 years, and till today, this situation is still with us, where the children in that sort of area have heightened levels of lead in their blood, way higher than the optimum sort of level. So you could see that that's one case. The other case we've also noticed has been during I think this was like, perhaps some of you could have seen this, where we had a tailings dam failure. There's a company called Sino Metals company. I think it's a Chinese state-owned sort of company, and where one of the critical rivers and water lifelines of our country was polluted, and people had a level of toxicity in their bodies, but also not just them. It's also the issue of their livelihoods, their crops, and that sort of thing. In Solwezi, where we're also working as Action Aid, we have had so many issues of water pollution, and people have been consuming polluted water. So there's a level of all these issues. I think what is very critical in preventing some of these matters is how can we strengthen our institutions that sort of regulate or enforce standards. We have the Environmental Management Agency in Zambia, the one that's in charge of environmental impact assessments, but there's sort of under budgeted for. If you look at the budget that goes to ZEMA, it's a tiny fraction, under 1% of the total budget. So how are they able to, for example, enforce regional presence? How are they supposed to tackle all the cases? How are they also supposed to inspect every single mine to ensure that they're adhering to standards? So there's that significant challenge, but also it's issues of technical capacity as well. You find that because they don't have enough funding, they might not have up-to-date equipment to sort of carry out testing and all those things. So I think that's one of the key challenges. So I think being able to see that we have significant or adequate funding to some of these the technical institutions from government would be very key. But also one other aspect we also lack is the issue of the legislation. We don't have due diligence that is sort of mandated by the law. It's not enforced at all. So companies take advantage of that. Where there's no law, they don't care. They just do whatever they need to do to make profit and that sort of thing. Yeah. So that also eventually has significant implications. Yeah. And one of the implications we see is the health issues that we've been seeing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Naomi. Does that answer your question? Perfect. I see a thumbs up. Great. Thank you so much. Maybe moving on to the question about consumer behavior and tempering consumer behavior here in the western part of the world. I already saw you reaching towards the microphone, so Marit, maybe you'd like to comment first.
Yeah, because I think it's also an institutional problem. When we look at, the term your ecological footprint was something that was invented by oil companies to make sure that we feel responsible for the footprint that we have, whereas actually these companies are, of course, the ones that are responsible for the way in which they produce and the way in which they pollute. So I think it's something that we should look at ourselves, the way in which we consume, but also it's something that we really have to work with in the system. I think the most outspoken example right now is fast fashion, something that has grown in the last 10 years enormously, also fueled by oil. Let's understand that most of the stuff that we buy is purely synthetic and totally inflammable because it's made by oil. And it's feeding the system of these companies, and therefore it's also brought onto into our consumer world, into our shops, and somehow we all feel that, well, of course when you buy a t-shirt for €2 that it's not well produced, but still it's there. And I think we cannot blame the 14 or 15-year-old that wants to go to a party and buys a new t-shirt. I think we really need to change that system to make sure that this kind of companies or this kind of products do not enter into our shops and into our consumer system anymore. So it asks something different. I agree that we should also temper ourselves. I really agree. But I think there is a responsibility which is not necessarily only with the consumer, but there is much more responsibility in looking at how the system functions and how the system also makes you feel bad. Because maybe at some point you have a cousin that is living in South Africa and you want to go there, and then you feel bad that you take a plane to go there. I think we should not blame ourselves all the time. I think we should look at the system and what the system does to us.
Yes. So yes, we can do more, but it needs to be systematic change.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If the system doesn't change, then nothing's going to change.
Yes. Yes. Would you like to comment still? Perhaps also, I'm curious from your side, how do you feel about, perhaps hearing or seeing that a lot of people in the Netherlands might be buying the newest iPhone and the newest Samsung? Right. How does that make you feel?
Also wanting the iPhone.
Yeah. Right. I think that was a pretty interesting question. I think it also brings me to what we're now calling critical minerals. So there's a question that everybody asks, especially in the global south. You call them critical minerals, but critical for who? That sort of thing. I think we perhaps need to manage our appetite for some of the consumption that we've seen, because it might be normal on our end, but on the other end of the line, it means something different for somebody. Yeah. It could be human rights violations, their longevity limited, and so I think.
But you give me a very diplomatic response. I'm curious, if you ever see people buying certain products with a certain ease, does it ever make you feel upset, especially because you are really close to those mining operations and seeing the effects on the other side?
Right. I think the key thing really that always runs through my mind, obviously, is the system of, is the issue of justice. I think we need to be able to see a level of justice being done. And that is why every time we speak about corporate social responsibility, it's not charity. It's an issue of justice. Mm-hmm. What is being extracted out of these communities has very lifelong impacts on the people, and so it does evoke some of those emotions that you just brought out right now. And I think we need to be more responsible, especially our companies, the foreign companies that invest in the global south. They really need to show a level of responsibility.
Yeah. Now. We are almost out of time, but there is someone else who asked the questions about reporting. I'm just going to ask you if maybe one of you wants to comment on that question. Would you like to, or perhaps Marit?
It's Simona's.
Yeah, Simona's job.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
or can you give us
all our shop? I just wanted to briefly add to this example of fast fashion, electric cars. Because the cars becoming larger and larger. Have you seen those images lately that they showed? That 20 years ago a car was like this, now it's like this, and it's electric and it uses, X times more resources, and including critical minerals for the batteries. So system change there, and we also have to make responsible choices. Well, yes. Anyway, Seneli's question. On the reporting mechanisms, it's difficult to get a real picture on the ground. I totally agree. I always say, because our commission says, we are transparent. And I always ask them, what is transparency? If you talk about people that we talked with in some corner of a country that don't have access to internet or very little, and they can't read kind of policy language, if they can read at all, then you're not transparent. If you say, okay, we put it on our website, so we're transparent. So what we have started now, for example, is training journalists from African countries, but also from the Middle East, North Africa region, on what is this environmental and social impact assessment? How can good journalism, investigative journalism, help making bad practices more known, bring things to the surface, and also hold governments to account. And for that to happen, is also somebody. You talked about legislation, the importance of legislation. Yeah, that is super important. So we also help governments improving their legislative frameworks, but also procedures and processes so that companies cannot just dive under anything, but they have to really follow what has been agreed, and that there is control over it. And I totally agree with you that organizations like in Zambia, ZEMA, have real issues. Those environmental protection agencies have real issues.
Yeah.
So we work with them, but also with other ministries to have a more integrated approach there as well.
And even
so
journalists.
Transparency is super important. Good journalism.
Yes.
And then also training NGOs on these issues so that they can really voice
Perfect.
concerns.
Now, I see it's already 1 o'clock and it's almost time for lunch. So I want to ask maybe if you can do within 30 seconds, I'm curious if you have any final takeaway for the audience. I'm going to start with you, Marit. Yeah, it's quick. I'm a big challenge.
Yeah, a big challenge. The title of the no, it says local communities. What was the title of our
the scramble? Scramble for Africa's minerals.
Yeah,
and whose benefits?
Yeah. Local. Who benefits? I think we must make sure, if we want to be responsible, that those the benefits first and foremost are the ones in those local communities, which doesn't mean that we cannot benefit, because I think it's something that we can also benefit from. But let's make sure that first and foremost it's the local communities that benefit, which also, well, we've said it several times before, means that we have to change some of our systems, but also hold people accountable.
Crystal clear. Thank you so much, Marit. Then, Akria, from your side, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think I would like to agree with what she said, but I also want to say that we really need to put pressure from the international level. So I think all of you have a role to play in sort of influencing your governments to adopt policies that are more responsible in terms of mineral sourcing, because the destination of most of these minerals are in the global north. So if they're not being extracted in the most responsible manner, like I said, it means something else for somebody there, limited longevity, human rights violations. So I think your role here as well to lobby your governments to be employ more responsible mineral sourcing practices would be very important. Thank you.
We all have a role to play. Thank you. And then finally, Simone.
Okay, there's
Closing
no
words.
one recipe for success, so we need everyone on board, both the international community, multilateral organizations who push, local voice that becomes stronger, and local governments that make better systems, and of course our own governments, and there we have a role to play. The Dutch people on board here, I always say, don't expect anyone else but us to help get solutions done. And so we have to really take responsibility, whether it's on Gaza, whether it's on these types of issues. If we don't do it, no one will do it. So the force of us and the power of the people, and I have this on my phone, the people united will never be defeated. And I think we have to go for it.
Please, can I get a round of applause? Now, I couldn't have closed off this session with better words, so thank you all for that. I want to thank you all very much. I think we'll have lunch for an hour now. I want to say thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk later. Thank you.
I don't know whether this is
This
yours.
was mine. I think it fell from
But
my
it's
pocket.
great, so we are also starting working in Zambia now, so I would love to have your
Sure.